Hello, everyone. We are going to get started in just a moment. In the meantime, we'd appreciate, sound off in the chat. Let us know where you're coming from today. And we are going to get started in just a moment as we let everyone join in on today's session. I am coming to you from North Carolina today, a little bit north of Charlotte. So okay, so let's go ahead. I think we're at the top of the hour now. Let's go ahead and dive in. So my name is Courtney Pollock, and I'm the Customer Marketing Coordinator for SWK Technologies. And I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, 2025 Tax Changes Your Businesses Can't Afford to Ignore. And today's session is going to be presented by our partners at Avalara. So before we dive in, just a couple of housekeeping items to go over here. Everyone has been placed on mute to keep the background noise to a minimum. However, throughout the webinar, you can participate in the chat, ask any questions you have, participate in our polls, and you can do all of that from the right-hand panel. So we really encourage you, love to hear from you in the chat, love to hear any questions you have throughout the session. We're going to answer those questions at the very end. So don't worry if you get your question in and it doesn't get answered right away. We are going to cover those as the presentation wraps. We're also going to record today's webinar. So, if you have someone that's unable to attend or you want to reference the material later on, we'll send out that recording to you tomorrow afternoon. And then with that said, SWK, it's just here to help you fulfill your vision of a smarter and easier way to run your business by providing you with tools, support, software, and industry knowledge whenever you need it. So we're so glad that you've taken some time out of your busy day to join us on this webinar. We hope you find it super informative. And whether you're here to explore Avalara's solution or you're just here to learn about tax changes upcoming this year, don't hesitate to ask those questions you have while we have, some people really knowledgeable with us today that have a lot of expertise to share. And then my last reminder is, SWK is constantly sharing important updates and software tips and tricks on our social media channels. So check us out on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube so you don't miss out. Okay, that is enough from me. I'm going to hand it over to Cameron and Connor to kick it off. So I'm going to add Cameron here to get us started.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Courtney. And thank you everyone who's joined. Just some quick housekeeping disclaimer. While we hope you'll find this discussion helpful, this session is for informative purposes only and is not for legal or tax advice. With that said, our agenda today, we're going to go over simplifying economic nexus. What is it? Do you have it? And what to do with it? Also, some of the laws that were on the ballots that were passed or not passed, some movers and shakers. Connor's going to go into states that consider delivery fees, taxation on digital goods and streaming, some future stuff, EV tax credits ending, are they? E-invoicing spreading worldwide, and the latest news in trade and tariffs. And if we have time at the end, we'll do some questions and answerings from the group. So without further ado, I'm going to send it over to Connor.
All righty. Thank you so much, Cam. First off, before I get rolling with my portion of the webinar, just want to say thanks to Courtney and the entire SWK team for hosting today's webinar, and also for allowing myself and Avalara to chat with you all today. Again, my name is Connor O'Donnell. I am Avalara's Acumatica sales executive. I've been in this role for about 4.5 years, and during that time, I've been partnered with SWK to support their clients with compliance automation solutions. So as Cam mentioned, we do have a lot to cover in today's session, and I'm going to discuss a lot of different topics with you all. And a lot of these topics you've probably seen recently in the news, like digital goods and streaming services, EV technology, and of course the big one, tariffs. So a lot of these topics will directly impact your business both on the domestic and international scale. So my goal for today's conversation is to provide you with the knowledge that you need to remain compliant really in this ever-changing landscape. So let's hop right into it. So it wouldn't be an Avalara webinar if I didn't start by talking about Nexus. A perk and a burden of working at Avalara is, for as long as I have, is that I'm constantly talking about Nexus. And truthfully, I find it fascinating because it's It's never stagnant. It's constantly changing. And really what's the catalyst for that change are the decisions being rendered by the state governments. And you can see on this slide here that the last year, 4 states that are listed here, Indiana, Wyoming, Alaska, and New Jersey, they all removed that 200 transaction threshold from their economic nexus requirements. So talking a little bit more about that, as the last slide alluded to, economic nexus is comprised of 2 data points. So the first one being sales volume, and sales volume being the number of transactions, but then also sales revenue. So the dollars going into that state. And what makes economic nexus so complicated is that each state has their own unique requirements and thresholds for economic nexus. And as the last slide showed, those thresholds are constantly changing. So it's never stagnant, and it's tricky to keep up with. And as you can see on this color-coded map, there's a few different requirements state by state. Drawing your attention to the dark red, California and Texas, they both have an economic nexus threshold of 500,000, but North Carolina, where I'm at, is only 100,000. So really, as a business leader, you all are being constantly inundated with a barrage of different information on a daily basis. So I wouldn't fault you if you didn't know from the last slide that Wyoming removed its 200 transaction threshold last year. Totally understandable. But that's really where Avalara comes into play. Our compliance software is going to monitor these changes in real time, inform you and inform your business how these impacts are changing your business's compliance standings. So let's go into compliance. Was really on the ballot this year for both state and local elections, but also on the national level. And really, just like the price of eggs, compliance was a significant driver for voter turnout in this last election. So let's take a few interesting results that derived from the 2024 election. So speaking of eggs, first election result I want to direct your attention to on this slide was a vote that happened in South Dakota. And this vote, which voted down a measure that that would have repealed grocery taxes in South Dakota. Other interesting election results included North Dakota voting against a measure that would have banned property taxes, and those property taxes correlated with the assessed values of the constituents within North Dakota. And lastly, Oregon voted against a measure imposing a corporate minimum tax on gross sales. So a lot of big changes happening on the ballots last year. And one that is particularly interesting, given that, Fat Tuesday was earlier this week. I think maybe celebrations might have been a little bit more tame, somewhat limited in the Bayou State, because they actually voted to raise their sales and use tax rate 0.65%. So taking their rate on the state level from 4.45 to 5%. So not as much on the celebration front there as their increase in taxes. All righty, y'all. Let's talk about a topic that I think is near and dear to a lot of our hearts. I do feel safe in assuming that we all have had some form of delivery arrive at our doorstep in the last week. At my house in particular, my wife loves buying and returning things on Amazon. So, she's on a first name basis with our Amazon driver, but I digress. There are big changes underway with retail delivery fees, and these changes are aimed mainly at the big companies you'd expect: Amazon, Uber Eats, DoorDash, but it's certainly not limited to these 3 companies. So let's dive in a little bit deeper here. So some examples to pull your attention to for retail delivery fees. In Colorado, their retail delivery fee is charged for all forms of delivery that contain at least one form of tangible personal property. It's TPP for short. And this retail delivery fee, not only did it change what it's included within, but it also it changed the price. It increased to 69 cents last year. If we go up north to Minnesota, they have a retail delivery fee of 50 cents for all deliveries that are $100 and more last year. So again, big changes that are happening for these different types of deliveries. And what is so fascinating about this example with Minnesota is where it gets tricky is that Minnesota as a state, they have a long-standing tradition that clothing is not taxable in Minnesota. However, this is tricky for businesses like you all to keep up with, because you still have to have that delivery fee if it's for clothes, even though clothes themselves as a product are not taxable in Minnesota. So that conundrum of a situation really highlights just how nuanced, but also how confusing state taxation determinations are. And if you are familiar with Avalara at all, this is where we help out. Our tax engine is integrating into your systems to make sure that we're getting all these different types of taxations correct on your taxable invoices. So let's move on now to the taxation of digital goods and streaming. Taking a page out of Netflix's recent crackdown on their users sharing profiles, in order for Netflix to generate more revenue, the states are similarly increasing their crackdown on taxation of streaming services in order to generate more revenue for their own coffers. So diving in here, highlighting this idea, two states I want to call your attention to. Massachusetts and New York both introduced a bill last year to apply taxation on streaming services across the board, which was a sweeping change for both of them, as that was not previously anything that either state had been entertaining. And a little cliche, but apparently it's not currently the happiest place in the world after all, because Disney in California, they're currently locked in a court battle on this exact same topic. These dad jokes are going to be happening for the next 25 minutes, so just strap in. I've got a few others of them. Alrighty, and then so it's not just streaming services in the state government's crossfires currently for applying new taxation. Michigan, for this example here, Michigan clarified its taxation rules for NFT last year. And Vermont also made changes to include software as a service, or SaaS for short, in its definition of tangible personal property, or TPP, which TPP is taxable in that state. So now Vermont is indicating that software as a service is a taxable entity, a taxable service, a taxable offering within their state. So big changes underfoot there. And just scaling back, I know I'm giving a lot of examples here, but what's spurring these fluctuations in compliance? At the end of the day, it's the growth trajectory that the states are seeing in the digital goods and services landscape. To me, this reminds me, and it's very similar to the transformation, a similar transformation of the boom of e-commerce, leading to the Supreme Court decision redefining the Nexus thresholds in that 2019 Wayfair versus South Dakota Supreme Court case. So if we're fast forwarding 6 years later to where we are here and now today, the states are just ensuring that their taxation standards are keeping pace and working in lockstep with the exponential growth that's occurring within the digital goods and services space. Alrighty, so if you own a Tesla or any other type of EV, I recommend listening up because I've got some compliance changes to share with you. So as you can see here, while this list is ever changing, there's two specific states, Pennsylvania and New Jersey, and then also DC. They moved to end their EV credit last year. So this is a big change that we're seeing. And typically these type of changes we do see happen in kind of more of like a watershed moment, where once a couple dominoes fall, a lot of other dominoes fall. So it'll be interesting to continue to watch this trend, see if it's a one-off situation for these handful of states, or if this is going to lead to a bigger, more substantial change for how states are dealing with EVs and the ultimate tax credits that EV gets. All right, y'all. So looking at today's conversation, I want to spend a good amount of time here broadening our scope just from domestic compliance and then scoping out to international compliance. So if anyone is on the webinar today and your business is working with international customers, Avalara, we are here to help with our suite of international products, which I'll talk about in a couple slides from now. But beforehand, it's important to set the stage that international compliance, it's in a very volatile situation right now. There's a lot of changes, there's a lot of unknowns, and it's something that at Avalara, we're keeping a very close watch of to ensure that our products are being able to align with all the changes that are happening. Because I mean, just listening to the news each and every morning, there's changes that are afoot when it comes to international compliance, especially if we're hitting that highlight or that buzzword of tariffs. So echoing that sentiment, at the end of the day, our goal at Avalara is to keep you as a business informed on any of the latest trade changes that are happening so that your business can stay proactive, you all can be prepared, and you're ready if any disruptions occur for you or your clients or your supply chain. Some things to note here. So the United States is considering really significant change policies when it comes to trade. And it's important to note that your business, it could be disrupted because of the supply chains and also trade relationships. A lot of companies that I'm talking with now are thinking for the first time about reshoring their business and their sales supply chain in order to combat some of that. So it's something that has a lot of different layers to it. It's very nuanced. But since last year, I mean, there's been new tariffs, there's been removals of de minimis, and then there's been retaliation actions back to different countries. And notices of sweeping changes, they're happening on that daily basis. So we'll give you a quick kind of overall timeline that we've seen here in the compliance space. And these key events are happening each and every day, hour by hour, minute by minute. For example, I mean, the announcement that there's now the 30-day pause on tariffs for U.S. automakers. That's something that's just happening in our system for international compliance, is making those notes and changes in real time as we get these updates. Alrighty, so to highlight the ever-changing and international compliance stage that it's at right now, kind of peeling back a little bit, going a little inside baseball here. We've had this slide deck ready for about a week and a half now, ready to go. But this specific slide we created and inputted input into the slide deck yesterday. Reason for that is because at Avalara, we're responding in real time to these changes to ensure that our compliance products are working again in tandem, in lockstep with the changes happening on that international stage. And just some things to note here. So we're finding that recently there's been some pretty significant changes in trade agreements. So I'm just going to list off a few a few international countries that have been impacted, just in case these are one that you either have a supply chain with, or you do business within, or you have some sort of engagement with. So the United States has changing their trade agreement with Argentina, with Australia, with Brazil, Canada, Japan, Mexico, South Korea, Ukraine, and the UK. Those have all been the most recent updates that our team on our international compliance team have heard of there being changes, whether that be like a steel tariff or aluminum tariff. Those type of trading partners, we've had those situations occur with in the last couple of weeks, last couple of days. Not in the last couple hours, but in the more recent time. Alrighty, so last thing that I've got for you here, even though these changes are happening hour by hour, we have your back, right? While it might seem kind of unstable or ever-changing, this is not something that we are unfamiliar with. I mean, we work with the state governments day in and day out, right? And if you want to talk about tumultuous, ever-changing, never stagnant, That can apply to our situation with international relations right now, but it also is just what we deal with state governments and their changes of taxation, product taxability, um, tax jurisdictions. So we're malleable as a business. Our software is in the cloud. It is able to be updated in real time. And our mission for the past 20 years has been to make compliance easy for you and make sure that you're prepared, whether that is locally here in your backyard in the States, or if you're dealing at all with any international customers. And at the end of the day, we have our cross-border team, which is our international team. And these folks are experts in their field. They're experts when it comes to international compliance and services. And just a few things that we're able to do. I mean, we're able to monitor the trade policy updates and proactively and adjust immediately. You can see some of the examples above. That team also can provide a variety of real-time tariff calculations and duty classification tools, which are going to be paramount as these changes are happening on the international stage. But the last thing, and I think this is one of, if not the most important thing, is just keeping you informed, right? You are the leaders in your business, so you are able to helm the ship correctly if you have all the information ahead of you. So we're able to keep you informed, make sure that you can be proactive in adapting to any changes that happen. And we're able to leverage our complementary trade tools to ensure that you're mitigating any risk that you might have for international compliance. And so I want to end here with a specific tool that Avalara has, because e-invoicing, this was, before tariffs became the buzzword, e-invoicing was the big buzzword for international compliance prior. So let's spend some time talking about Avalara's service offerings there. So over 80 countries have e-invoicing requirements, and this list is ever changing, right? I feel like that's the buzzword of this webinar, is ever changing. So listed here are some of the updates to e-invoicing requirements that happened in 2024 that I want to call your attention to. Some countries like Germany and Saudi Arabia now require e-invoicing, whereas some countries like Poland and France, they push back their launch of e-invoicing requirements until next year, 2026. So Avalara was working in lockstep to make sure that we have the e-invoicing capabilities for the countries that are required, and we are prepared when countries that have e-invoicing on their roadmap, either later this year, next year. We even have visibility into countries that have this planned for 2027 or 2028. To ensure that we are ready to go when those countries are ready to roll for e-invoicing. And then the last slide I'm going to lead you all with here is just Avalara's service offerings. So I've alluded to most of these here, but just kind of wrapping everything up here with a bow. So we have three main services in the international compliance to help out with. Our cross-border service is going to be one that's pretty much standard for any company that is working with international compliance. But we also have our tariff code classification and then our trade management system that are two additional service offerings that complement Avalara cross-border. And again, we are here to answer any questions that you might have when it comes to international compliance, either through your ERP, or as you can see listed here, if you're doing any international sales via e-commerce, we can help out with those marketplaces as well. So I want to kick it back over to Cam here to talk about a little service that we have. The thing I also want to say here too is appreciate everyone's engagement and their participation in today's webinar. I know there was a lot of information that we covered here. So if you do want to continue on with any of the conversations of any of the topics that we have, once Cam finishes up with the promotion that we'll have available, we'll provide my information, and I'm happy to facilitate any conversations here as needed for you in your business. So thank you all, and Cam, I'll kick it over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Connor. Great job. A lot of new stuff, a lot of new updates. I'm sure there was some light bulbs going off for the folks in the crowd. If you're sitting there and wondering, based on what you saw today, how do I start to wrap my hands around this? I know that we've probably got some obligations to collect and remit, or based on some of the stuff that I saw today, just curious if we have any exposure there or risk when it comes to the items that Connor shared. If you are in that environment and you want to see where you have any risk, any exposure, we have a tool called a sales tax risk assessment. And it is literally a tool that we developed. Once you sign up, you get a questionnaire, and you go through the different things that your business is doing, from states that you're in, where you're shipping, type of business, all these questions on the questionnaire. You can complete it at your own pace. Once you submit that to us, we do an in-depth economic and physical nexus to see where you have obligations, where you can mitigate risk, and where you have exposure. Once you get that, we do go through that with you and figure out how now can we add a compliance piece, or how can we have a conversation to mitigate any risk that you have. Typically, because of the robust nature of the sales tax risk assessment, we do charge $4,500, but we partnered with SWK to provide those on the call today that went through the webinar, that got the updates, to provide that at no cost or free to you all. There is a QR code to take advantage of it in the bottom left. You can also click on the button in the upper right. That will kick things off. And again, you can go at your pace. We want to learn about your business and see any areas where you have triggered an obligation to collect and remit to the state, or any of the other items that we talked about today. So you can always ask your SWK or Connor for any additional information. If you want to take a deeper dive on any of the points that Connor touched on today, in the upper right, you can click and get the Avalara tax changes to 2025. It's a very robust guide that goes through all the ins and outs, a little bit deeper dive of what we touched on today. And again, you can access it by clicking the upper right. We appreciate your time today. I think now we're going to turn it over to Courtney for any Q&A, and I believe we have a poll as well.
Yes. Thank you, Connor. Thank you, Cameron. Hopefully we've got some questions out there in the audience, because as you saw, and as we just mentioned, you can download that full 2025 Avalara tax changes report if you click the yellow button at the top of the screen. So that's going to be super in detailed version of what Connor shared here today. And forgot to add Connor back so that we can all get his expertise. So if you have some questions now before diving all the way into that report, please put them in the Q&A session. I know I have some questions I wrote down that I want to ask you guys, so we'll dive into those in just a second. And then also in the meantime, I would love it if you guys would participate in our poll that will be launching in just a moment. So you can check that out on the right-hand side of your screen in the poll section. And we're just curious to know, after joining today's webinar, what would be most helpful to you? So, how can we help you guys out on your tax journey, whether that be diving into some of these changes with you, a personal consultation, helping you directly with that great offer that we have for the risk assessment. Anything you want, or you can let us know that, hey, you were just here for education today, and that's great too. We love to hear that. So appreciate everyone participating in that poll. I'm going to leave it open throughout the Q&A session. And Connor and Cam, let's dive in and, go ahead and get your questions in that Q&A box as well. And I'll get those asked to our great partners at Avalara. Okay, now that I took a deep breath, you guys ready?
We're ready.
Okay, perfect. So what if I don't have, the staff to do all of this stuff internally? Is there an outsourced option? So I think this would be, I'm curious for our small businesses out there, how this can work.
Yeah, at the end of the day, that is one of Avalara's biggest value drivers, is that we are automating manual processes. So most folks that I speak with are dealing exactly with that. We've got a finance or an accounting team of 1 to 2 people, and sales tax is not something that we're an expert at or want to spend our time in what could be revenue generating time focusing on sales tax. So Avalara's big value to you as a business and as a partner of your business is to automate these tasks for you and really just outsource compliance in general, whether it's the taxable side, the exempt side, remitting returns, business licenses, international, like we talked about. We are a full service compliance automation company.
Okay, that is great to know. And I'm going to take a pause. We did have a question that asked, where can I get that link to the free risk assessment? I'm going to pop that back up on everyone's screen. So if you can just click, you got that click here button that has appeared over Cam's head. So if you click there, that's going to take you to the page to do the risk assessment. Just for tracking purposes, you will have to, there we go, helpfully pointing. For tracking purposes, you will have to fill out, short form, but don't worry. It's no, crazy information. You're not going to get hounded any differently. So go ahead and fill that out and we will reach out to you about that. Okay. And I'm going to leave that up there. And then my next question for you guys is, what if I don't know what I need, or if I'm compliant, or, I've got no clue what's going on with our compliance and taxes and all these things? Is there a research or audit service available? I know we did the risk assessment. Is there anything else that you can tell us about there?
Yeah, I'm always in, and I have these conversations with new prospective clients every day. Always recommend that folks start first with this risk assessment. It's a great partnership agreement that we have with SWK that you all who attend the webinar can get this as a free service. So that's where we figure out what the landscape of your compliance situation is. So in which states you need to get registered in, if there's any previous liability we need to take care of. But then from there, if we actually scale in on just answering some of these how-to questions, we have a variety of tools that are giving you these yes/no answers to your even most convoluted, complex compliance questions. The tool I'm thinking of specifically is our research tool, very aptly named Avalara Tax Research. Think of that as a verified Google specifically for compliance, in which you can ask those specific questions. You can click the state that your situation is occurring in, and we'll give you a very defined, yes, it's taxable, or no, it's exempt to these questions. So that's our main one, in addition to our standard products like our tax engine, or our exemption certificate management system if you're dealing with non-taxable customers.
Okay, awesome. Great information. And I also want to just shout out our great audience members who I saw put some questions in the chat, and then you guys so kindly moved it over to the Q&A area. So that's super helpful to me. Everyone's so nice today. So we do have some questions from the audience. So I'm going to switch over to some of those. Someone asked, as more cities move to remitting taxes themselves separate from the state, will we need to register with cities the same way we need to register with those states?
It's a really good question, John. So there are certain states that are already doing this. The ones that come to mind are Colorado is a big one with home rule returns. Another one is Alabama, Louisiana with the different parishes. So we are seeing that there is certain use cases where states are having these individual jurisdictions within the state that you have to remit to. Now, if it becomes like I mentioned before, like a domino effect, it's hard to tell, but there are definitely more states now than when, I first started at Avalara that are having these additional requirements to remit at that lower level in addition to the statewide level. So if I had to put a bet on it, I would say probably.
Great.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot of things to keep track of there.
Absolutely.
Okay. Cam, did I interrupt you there?
No.
Okay, perfect. Must be just some feedback I'm getting. So another question we had out there in the audience, this person is a current Avalara customer, and they're saying they're having, some issues with New Mexico transactions recently, and they were wondering if anything had changed specifically in New Mexico. I'm not sure. Wanting to dive in on that, if you just tax genius know it off the top of your head.
I don't know for New Mexico specifically if anything changed, but what we can do, Mandy, we can get your information and then have your customer account manager reach out to you to see what's going on in New Mexico, see if that's something specifically with the integration that you have with Avalara, or if it's just some bigger changes with the state as a whole.
Perfect. Yeah, so we can definitely follow up, and we try our best to answer everything live on the webinar, but sometimes the questions get a little detailed. So we will follow up with you. Another great question is, can Avalara software be added to Sage 100 for real-time use to add taxes to our invoices?
Absolutely. Yep. So we have integrations across the board. Last count, 1,200 pre-built integrations. Sage 100 is one of them as well.
Yes, I think we touch on just some other, I'm sure we have some other SWK customers out there. So you guys also have an integration for Acumatica as well, correct? And other Sage products as well.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Yep. Okay. This person said, what's the consequences if you miss the threshold requirement for filing? Is there a deadline for that economic threshold?
Yep. So if the question is for remitting returns, there is penalties associated with missing return deadlines. So that's why Avalara, for our returns platform, when we're filing or remitting returns on your behalf, we follow the same exact filing timeline each and every month. So you know that we're going to be approving your returns and then pulling money on your behalf via an ACH pull between the 11th and the 15th of every month, to ensure that we are guaranteeing on-time filing, so you won't have any penalties or late fees associated with returns being remitted through Avalara.
Okay, perfect to know. Okay. I think, again, just a little bit of feedback there. Thank you, Connor. So I think this is going to be our final question. So if you have a question, here's your last moment to get it in before we wrap for the day. So my last question for you, I think, is probably something that's on everyone's mind. Can you guys tell us a little bit about how your pricing works?
And is my audio coming in okay? Okay, I wasn't sure who was fuzzing. So how our pricing works. Our pricing is all based off of your usage. So we are a usage-based company here at Avalara. So it's all indicative of how much you're going to use our software in the states that you're registered in. So that's why starting with this risk assessment first is useful, because it's going to ensure that we know first in which states you need Avalara to get you registered in. Then once we know in which states you need to get Avalara to get you registered in, then we can plop in the software solutions for those necessary states, not only the ones that you're in right now, but if there's any additional ones. So it's all based off of your usage of our products in the states that you're in.
Awesome. Great to know. So that, I think, I didn't see any last minute questions come in. We had a lot of great questions from the audience. So we just want to say a quick thank you for everyone that has joined us today. Like we said, I think our heads are blocking some of the info here, but if you didn't have a chance to answer the poll or use the link to fill out the risk assessment, no worries. Reach out to your SWK rep. We'll provide you with Connor's information. You can always reach us at info@swktech.com. Our website is there beside it as well. So we hope you found this session really informative, and we're here to help. If you have any more questions, if there's anything else you want to know about Avalara, about the recent tax changes, etc., we'd love to connect you with them. So just reach out, let us know, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you, Connor and Cam, for being here with us today. We love partnering with Avalara, and I was happy that we were able to do this session.
Thanks for having us. It was great meeting all, and appreciate everyone's questions today. And to echo Courtney, if you have any other questions, I'm here to help. So hope you have a great rest of your Thursday.
Thank you so much.